Something I always talk about, sexual integration. Sexual integration is really a big part of the crux of what the purpose is of the videos that I make. Really, a lot of the music and the content and things like that I make in general, it's about integration, right? But the thing to understand about that is that, unless you're already in the relationship that you want to be in, and that type of situation is integrated and it's holistic and it's fulfilled, then you are in a position to where, unless you're in a situation to where your sexual energy is being poured into you and poured back out, and it's in a sustainable way that increases it or at least sustains it, then you are in a position where you can go through sexual disintegration. Now, I have a video talking about when the cup is low, why insecure women can't be truly submissive, right? And really what I'm talking about there is just something that occurs for a woman, right? It's cup theory, right? It's cup theory. When your cup gets too low, like for a woman, even if she has the capacity to be feminine and submissive, when she's not receiving proper guidance, or if her securities get lower, if she's suffering with mental illness, or she's suffering with a variety of things, maybe she's suffering from just her lifestyle is making it so that she can't be in her emotions. She has to be more logical and think about ways of trying to meet her needs. And when a woman is in that particular position, her feminine energy, unless it's compartmentalized and disciplined, her feminine energy is going to start to disintegrate and start turning into masculine energy, and then it's going to become masculine submissive. And from that place, then the order of priorities of what she has for a man is going to start to lower from a place of things that create intrinsic desire and intrinsic reward to a thing that becomes more transactional, right? So what we have to understand, either more transactional, right, or more duplicitous. So this is something that's important to understand. So let's say we're looking at the topic of sexual disintegration for a man. So let's say that as a man, your goal, or just as a human being in general, your goal is to reach a place of alignment. You need to be either masculine and dominant or feminine and submissive. That's polarity. When you're in polarity, you can be in a relationship with the individual and you can pour into each other, and it's going to be something that gives an increasing level of power. Think about it kind of like Neo and Trinity in Matrix Resurrections, right? Anytime they were in each other's space, their connection was what created this great amount of power. So what happens sometimes is, as a person, some people are prematurely integrated. But you can begin to integrate, right? You can begin to integrate yourself and then want to be in a sexually integrated relationship. But what can happen along the way is, if you don't get the things that you need to meet your physical needs or your emotional needs or your sexual needs, then you're going to start to disintegrate. So if you're masculine and dominant, chances are you're going to disintegrate into either being masculine submissive, which is transactional, or you're going to turn into feminine dominant. And what feminine dominant is you're going to be either manipulative, you're going to be abusive, right? You're going to not be logical. You're going to fixate on a particular woman instead of on a particular relationship dynamic and outcome. And then you're going to start to behave in a way that doesn't exude proper leadership and guidance, right? So like, let's say as a man, you're working on your program, you're working on your rotation. Let's say your rotation gets low, your sexual needs become unmet. Because your sexual needs are becoming unmet, right? And you're trying to go about things in the way that you believe is proper for your program. Now, one thing people need to understand is this. A lot of people try to push this idea of security and confidence as something that is static, right? As something that doesn't change. As once you get it, you got it forever. That's not true. That's not true. See, confidence is based on a combination of a few different things. There's the security that you have within yourself, self-love, self-soothing. But self-love and self-soothing only goes so far before you have to shut it off. It only goes so far before you have to shut it off, or before you go through sexual disintegration, right? So when you go through sexual disintegration, that's when you get to that place. And when you get to that place, that's where you're going to start to question yourself. Now, premature integration does this a lot of the time, right? It does this a lot of the time. Like, if you're fully feminine and submissive, certain things aren't going to bother you the same way it's going to bother somebody else. because you're open and you're giving up control. So as long as you're receiving proper guidance and your expectations are being set, most things that may hurt or feel disrespectful to other people are going to be things that further increase your desire and your respect for an individual. You desire to be stretched. But let's say you're feminine submissive and you're put into a situation where you become more masculine, disintegration occurs, and from that place of disintegration, when your cup gets low, that's where you start losing the ability to be feminine and emotional about the way that you make decisions. Let's say you lose that place of guidance, you lose that place of structure. Once you lose those things, then you start disintegrating. Or let's say you are in a scenario with an individual who doesn't know how to take control, with an individual who doesn't know how to be dominant. And because they don't know how to be dominant, you start disintegrating into taking a dominant stance yourself. And when you take a dominant stance yourself, then you start to become duplicitous, or you start to become, dishonest. You start lying. You might start cheating. You might start doing a variety of things that happen. And sometimes that can also happen if you're taking a masculine submissive stance and you don't feel like your needs are fully met, right? As long as your needs are fully met, you can stay in a static place of being masculine submissive, but you need to be trying to seek, integrating into being feminine submissive or masculine and dominant. So for a man, I have conversations with people. I've been through this myself. Let's say you're working on your program, you're working on your rotation, maybe unsuspectingly, or with that, a surprise will happen where you will start losing certain women that you're dealing with. And when you start losing certain women that you're dealing with, in order to compensate for that, you're either going to start questioning how you're approaching women, right? Questioning the way that you deal with women to see if you need to change something, like if there's something that you're doing wrong, right? So that you can keep that particular woman. And sometimes you do need to do that. Like sometimes you are fucking up. Sometimes you are fucking up and you need to question yourself. But that means you're going to have to take a feminine stance of yielding towards understanding, where someone else is coming from, right? And sometimes that communication can lead to further sexual polarity erosion. So one thing I like to emphasize is this. Most guys, they've been in a position. Let's say you're working on your game, you're working on your program, you're working on your rotation. And then let's say you're approaching a certain amount of women. You're not seeing a certain amount of success with those women that you're approaching. And from going to that place, you put yourself into a scenario to where you start questioning your program. So you might say, okay, well, maybe I'm not giving these women enough attention. Maybe I'm not giving them enough of my time. Maybe I'm not spending enough money on them. Maybe I'm not putting myself in a scenario to where they feel like they can get more out of me emotionally, or get more out of me with my time, attention, my energy, my resources. So you start saying, okay, well, I'm going to present this to a woman and try to trade it, right? But if you try to be masculine and submissive and then you realize that you're not getting your needs met, then you further disintegrate into being feminine and dominant, because you want that person more than you want things to go your own way. But now you're in a position where they're not taking the lead, they're not taking charge, right? Because they're not taking charge and being dominant, you have to figure that out on your own. So you start becoming dominant yourself, right? And when you start becoming dominant yourself from a stance of dealing with a woman who isn't being submissive with you, or she's being masculine submissive, right? Or she isn't being emotional enough with you so that she can be receptive to your dominant masculine energy, then you put yourself in a situation to where the dominance that you would show will come from a place that she doesn't trust. And when that dominance comes from a place she doesn't trust, if she loves you enough, she'll stick around. But the things you're saying, the things you're doing, the way that you're behaving is hurting her, right? It's hurting her. It's not something that's pleasurable. And sometimes you'll become dominant from an emotional stance because you want to keep a woman around, right? And oftentimes that'll happen after you try to become masculine from a submissive stance. You start yielding yourself to her. You start, lowering how dominant you are to make her more comfortable. And when she doesn't reciprocate that by becoming more feminine and submissive with you, then you get emotional about it, and then you get frustrated. And then from that place of frustration, you start doing and saying things, maybe ways you've experienced before, that just won't suit that particular woman for where she is with you. Maybe her cup is low as well. So as a man, when your cup gets low, there's different things that can happen, and there's different ways that you can deal with that. I don't want to talk only about the problem and not about solutions. So let's say you're a man, you're masculine and dominant. So you say, you know what, your cup starts getting low, you don't have any women around, but you know that you have sexual needs that need to be met. The longer those sexual needs aren't met, the harder it is for you to maintain your emotional discipline. So when you lose your emotional discipline, that's when you start switching it up. So when you switch it up, you might say, you know what, I'll be a side nigga. You know what I mean? Instead of being a leader, you'd be like, all right, cool, well, I'll fuck with this woman on her time. I'll do things on her terms. You know what I mean? Well, at least I'm getting some consistent sex, right? Or you might deal with the woman, and here's another aspect of sexual polarity erosion or sexual disintegration. Another big aspect of sexual disintegration is putting yourself into a position where you begin to deal with and talk to and pursue women that you're not attracted enough to integrate with, right? You're not attracted enough to them, or you don't value them enough to be able to be a leader in that scenario. So you're cool with just being in a scenario where it works like that. And I'll say this, sometimes you will have to put yourself in this, you don't have to, right? But sometimes you will put yourself in scenarios where you just need to make sure that you got some consistent sex going on, right? To fill your cup up, a consistent place where you can place your dominant masculine energy into. Because when you have a dominant sexual ego, if you don't feel like you're having control, if you don't feel like you're dominating somebody's not receptive to your energy, it'll start to disintegrate your dominant energy to where you start feeling like you're becoming a shell of your former self. And you might start to question the way that you approach women, the way you interact with women, and then feel like you need to do something different. This is something that oftentimes happens with gigolos, right? So, a nice guy will disintegrate from that point and become a fuckboy, right? A dominant masculine man will often disintegrate from that and become masculine-submissive, or he might skip over masculine-submissive if he's just completely against anything transactional, and then he'll start running more game. He'll start, being a little bit more manipulative, a little bit more implementing tricks and tools and techniques to catch a woman's hand in the cookie jar so that he can fuck with her. And what I say is this, sometimes it's a transitional phase. Sometimes there's certain liminal spaces. Sometimes you're going to have to do things a certain way to make sure that your needs are met long enough so that you can refill your cup, and then after refilling your cup, then you can get back to the place you need to get to. And that's really a big part of what having a rotation is about. But what you have to understand is that for both men and women, right, there is validation involved. Don't think that validation is just something that relates to women. And don't think that just because a man is masculine and dominant that there's no validation involved. The validation is a woman giving him control is something that makes him feel good, right? A woman giving him control is something that makes him feel strong. It makes him feel masculine. And you can have a certain level of security or confidence based off of having a consistency of experiences that can validate the way that you view and see yourself. But that past shit is only going to last for so long before you start feeling like, well, what have I done lately that makes me feel masculine and dominant? What woman have I dealt with lately who, when I pour my energy into her, she pours it back out to me? And when you get to that place, sometimes people will just shut down, right? You'll shut down. So some people, they'll shut down. They just got to cut out dating and talking and fucking with women for a while. Some men, they'll just start becoming duplicitous. Some men will start paying for pussy. It's just a variety of ways that these things go.